Right now on Denver 7 News at 6 a.m.
Mothers across the country are looking to us for help.
Lawmakers will vote today to address the baby formula shortage.
And more support is coming to Colorado families as well as their newborns. I'm Denver 7's Veronica ACOSTA with how a new state partnership will help.
Plus, despite parents' protests,
we're all left really perplexed and dismayed.
This is a decision that will have ripples for generations.
Overnight, Aurora voted to close 2 of its schools.
And what a win!
Manson scores! Josh Manson wins game 1.
The Avs start out round 2 strong in an overtime victory. How fun would it have been to be at Ball Arena last night for that
rocking.
moment? That's
Yeah.
awesome, yes. Thanks for staying with us this morning. I'm Nicole Brady.
And I'm Brian Sanders. Just a game of inches last night that fortunately went the Avs' favor. Lisa, I don't know how you got any sleep in your house last night.
I didn't, but it's a good thing I hear the screams, so I know what's happening out there. Yeah, mid to upper 50s early this morning. It's going to be a fun series. Right now we're looking at a little bit of cloud cover here over Denver. The good news is we're going to see some pretty cool, wet conditions by the end of the week. Bad news is before we get there, the winds are going to kick up and it's still going to be pretty warm. Today on the calm side, we're going to be in the mid to upper 70s by lunchtime. Highs will be right around 80 this afternoon. So we're still about 7 to 10 degrees above normal today. Denver 80 to about 82. Mid to upper 70s near Castle Rock and Parker. Boulder 82. 60s and 70s in the mountains today. A lot of alerts have been issued. Coming up here in a few minutes, we're going to take a look at those, plus the risk for a few storms today. It's a marginal risk, mainly across parts of southeastern Colorado. So not a lot of rain today, none tomorrow. Quite a bit more by Friday. Details coming up.
Right now we do have a couple of slow spots, but the early morning problems that we had are all cleared up, which is good news. And you can see on the map here this morning, whether it's I-76 or 270, starting to see that traffic getting heavier. Take a look from the camera at I-76, right at the Commerce City split. That ramp would take you into Vasquez into Commerce City. And you can see that westbound side already getting heavier. So the drive time right now is pretty standard, about 15 minutes here. Not too bad on I-25 just yet, but 10 minutes across Commerce City. No problems to or from the airport. That looking pretty good. And actually security wait times are better than they have been all week, at only about 15 minutes right now inside DIA. The rest of the drive looks just fine. We'll take a look at the rest of those developing trouble spots coming up here this morning.
Well, it's a parent's worst fear, of course, to not be able to feed their own children. This morning, for new parents, amid a baby formula shortage, we are bringing you every solution we hear about.
And we do have some better news for you this morning. Help is on the way from the House of Representatives, who will vote on several measures today. One bill would allow people under the Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, or WIC, to use vouchers on any formula brand. The other would give the FDA $28 million to increase the staff in charge of inspecting formula before it's sent to grocery stores, and would help companies prepare for future shortages.
Also, the FDA is looking to increase imports of formula from other countries with a more streamlined review process. Nestle is flying in formula supplies to the U.S. from the Netherlands and Switzerland. Abbott Labs, meanwhile, is ramping up production of Similac at its Columbus, Ohio facility. The company's main production facility in Michigan is in the process of reopening after that months-long investigation connected to a recall.
Locally, meanwhile, the state is also taking action to help these families. Denver 7's Veronica ACOSTA explains a new partnership that was just announced by the governor.
Well, some parents are likely waking up this morning, heading back out to the grocery store, trying to find whatever baby formula they can. This, of course, after weeks of it being scarce on those shelves. Now, Abbott, a company that actually produces baby formula, it just reached a new deal with the FDA. Despite that, it could be more than 8 weeks until we see those shelves fully restocked, and that is exactly why Governor Polis is encouraging these milk donations through a nonprofit. So here's how this partnership is going to work. The state, along with Mother's Milk Bank, they're calling for donations of either breast milk or financial donations that could really help some of these families offset costs. This is also an effort to highlight options that exist for parents out there who really do need to get some milk to their babies.
Not every parent is able to breastfeed. Not every family has direct access to milk themselves. So, whether they're going to formula or to donor human milk, either way, they're just trying to find a way to feed their baby.
Now, the cost is something the partnership between the state and Mother's Milk Bank doesn't address. Typically, an ounce of donated milk that can cost parents between $3 and $5. So if you really start to think about it, if that average infant drinks about 25 ounces a day, that can cost families more than $500 a week. So if you're at all interested in donating, all you have to do is go to rmchildren.org. You fill out a form. There are some requirements for that as well, and then you can be a part of that. And of course, those financial donations, those are always welcome as well. We're in Denver this morning. I'm Veronica, ACOSTA, Denver 7.
Thank you, Veronica. Well, this morning, a dozen more people are suing the city of Denver after these 2020 protests, you'll remember, over the murder of George Floyd. And like earlier lawsuits, they accuse police of using excessive force during those demonstrations. Denver 7's Jessica Crawford joins us because, Jessica, time is running out for protesters to file complaints.
That's right, Brian. And this particular lawsuit claims that Denver police indiscriminately used tear gas and shot projectiles at peaceful protesters, and that they knowingly endangered protesters by, like you said, using excessive force. Here's a look back at those protests that happened about 2 years ago. 12 protesters are making these recent allegations. They filed suit against the city and county of Denver following local protests after the 2020 police murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. The people filing suit here also say that officers tried to intimidate and deter people from exercising their First Amendment rights of free speech and assembly. The suit claims that DPD used less lethal weapons, quote, indiscriminately and without any or adequate warning, even at times when the crowd was merely chanting, kneeling, or standing with their hands up. This case comes months after a $14 million verdict was awarded to other protesters on March 25th. Some of the attorneys who worked on that suit are working on this one as well. More than a dozen lawsuits have been filed against Denver in connection with these protests, and time to file them is running out. The statute of limitations is 2 years, and the protests started in May of 2020.
Jessica, thank you. Speaking of legal matters involving protests, the man who shot 2 people while aiming at a Jeep that was driving through a crowd of protesters has now been sentenced to 120 days in jail and 5 years probation. Samuel Young fired 5 shots during a protest against police violence on I-225 in Aurora during the summer of 2020. He has since apologized to the people he shot at the sentencing hearing. Both of them survived.
Well, for many families, their kids' school is the heart of their neighborhood. Now, Aurora has decided to close 2 local elementary schools, and parents were not happy about that overnight decision. Denver 7's KRISTIAN Lopez joins us with the outcry this has caused and what comes next now.
Yeah, parents were clearly very upset after the board decided to close Paris and Zabel elementary schools. That school board meeting lasted about 7 hours last night. We know parents and teachers had been rallying to keep those 2 schools open. Ultimately, though, the board voted to move forward with closing them as part of its long-term blueprint APS plan that addresses a drop in enrollment. And this comes just 2 months after the board had originally voted to save the schools, but they couldn't come up with different criteria for deciding how to address the district's challenges. The superintendent also said that a pause to consider more data would destabilize other schools in the district. And during that meeting last night, you could hear parents yelling at the board after that decision was made.
You are failing your community. You are failing your community.
All right. I know that this is a difficult decision. It was excuse me. It was a difficult decision, a difficult vote. We need to have quiet, please. This was not made easily by anyone, whether you're voting yes or no, I know.
And under this plan, those schools would close next May, and now the board must decide what to do with those 2 buildings. Live this morning, I'm KRISTIAN Lopez, Denver 7.
Well, the Avs are off to a great start in round 2 of the playoffs.
Yeah, game 1 against the Blues last night was a battle. Maybe a preview of how this series might go. The Avs finally won, so good news. 3-2. It was in overtime with this shot by Josh Manson finding the top shelf of the net for the game-winning goal. Just a small window there for the puck to find. Great shot. It was his first playoff goal. Game 2 is tomorrow at 7:30 back at Ball Arena. The crowd goes wild, and hopefully they'll be right behind him again for Game 2. Lisa.
I'll have the forecast for tomorrow night's game coming up here in just a few minutes on the Super 7 Day. Now it's 6:10. I want to show you the drought monitor and just how awful it is here in through the central U.S., stretching all the way to the West Coast, obviously covering Colorado. So what's going to come Friday into Saturday? A chance of snow, maybe not your favorite in May, but it's needed. We're going to take a look at this next storm and just how cool and wet it's going to get coming up.
And it's still pretty quiet here across the roadways, getting busier in some of those usual spots like here across downtown Denver, where you can see there's the Park Avenue West flyover that takes us right by Coors Field. So this is the southbound side of I-25. There's 44th Avenue right there. So a pretty easy start for our drive going down past Mile High. We have some trouble spots that are developing right now. We'll take a look at those for you coming up in just a bit.
Next and all new here at Denver 7 News at 6 a.m. Evidence that the government's efforts to control inflation is making it even harder for you to buy a home right now. Plus.
I'm John Matarese. Is your phone listening to every word you say and then targeting you with ads? What about Amazon's Alexa? You may be surprised by the findings of a new investigation. That story coming up.